This is just a sample of the audiobook. To get the complete audiobook, access the link posted in the first comment.
Abraham Lincoln had a problem. His flatboat, carried by the rush of spring waters, had run aground atop a mill dam in the Sangamon River. The square bow of the 80-foot boat hung over the dam, cantilevered like a diving board. Meanwhile, the stern was sinking lower and lower as it took on water. If Lincoln didn't think of something quickly, the vessel might break apart. The young man had built the boat with a plan in mind. Along with his cousin, he would take on cargo, travel down the river from central Illinois to New Orleans, and there dismantle the boat, selling both its timber and cargo on behalf of a man willing to underwrite the venture. Together, he and his cousin had cut down trees for lumber upstream from where they were now marooned. They had built the boat and loaded it in with dry pork, corn, and live hogs. All had seemed well when they set off hours before, but now, on April 19, 1831, far from his intended destination, Lincoln had to do something to save his boat and his cargo. As goods slid slowly astern in the tilting craft, Lincoln went into action. Removing his boots, hat, and coat, he improvised. First, he and his two-man crew shifted most of the goods to the nearby shore. Next, while he hurriedly bored a large hole with a hand drill, his team began rolling the remaining cargo of heavy barrels forward, thereby shifting the boat's center of gravity. The strategy worked. As the flatboat's bow began to tilt downward, water poured out of the hole. As the boat got lighter, it rose in the water. After plugging the hole, Lincoln and his men, helped by the spring currents, managed to ease the box-like craft clear of the dam. The crowd of villagers that had gathered to observe the spectacle of a sinking boat was astonished. No one had seen anything like it. But they had also never met Abraham Lincoln. Just 2 months beyond his 22nd birthday, at first sight, he was unmistakably a country bumpkin, dressed in ill-fitting clothes with that exaggerated 6'4" height, with long arms and exposed ankles sticking out of 2 short shirts and homespun trousers. He made, said one observer, a rather singular, grotesque appearance. But the young man who saved the boat possessed a loose-limbed grace that disguised both unexpected strength and a driving ambition to make something of himself. Weighing over 200 pounds, he could lift great weights and throw a cannonball farther than anyone around. He ran and jumped with the best of his peers. To the people he met, the young man's appearance quickly became secondary. When I first saw him, reported one New Salemite, I thought him a greenhorn. His appearance was very odd, but, after all, this bad appearance, I soon found him to be a very intelligent young man. Lincoln surprised people who found he was not an illiterate rube, but a man with a lively wit and keen intelligence. He impressed not only the day's onlookers, but also the owner of the flatboat. After completing the trip to New Orleans, Lincoln returned to New Salem to accept the man's offer to clerk at a new general store. He would sell foodstuffs, cloth, hardware, tobacco, gunpowder, boots, whiskey, and other goods to the people of New Salem, and the local farmers who visited the little market town to sell their grains. Like a piece of floating driftwood, as Lincoln later described himself, he accidentally lodged at New Salem. He would establish a new and happy life there, a world apart from his childhood in the backwoods. The short and simple annals of the poor. Before striking out on his own, as Abraham Lincoln himself would tell the story, he had been under the thumb of his hard-luck father. Born during the Revolution, Thomas Lincoln was still a boy when his family, following in the footsteps of a distant cousin, Daniel Boone, left the Shenandoah Valley for the territory known as Kentucky. Barely 2 years later, in 1786, Thomas's father Abraham died when planting corn in a field, shot by a roving Native American war party. His entire estate went to the eldest son, leaving the youngest, Thomas, destitute, a wandering, laboring boy who grew up literally without education. Thomas Lincoln eventually saved enough money to buy a farm in Hardin County and, in 1806, took Nancy Hanks as his wife. The following year, they became parents, with the birth of daughter Sarah. 3 years later, the family expanded again with the arrival of a son, Abraham, born on February 12, 1809, and named for his grandfather. Unfortunately for baby Abraham, the Lincoln family stability was short-lived. Before he turned two, poor soils forced the family to abandon their first log cabin for more fertile ground a few miles away. Just 5 years later, after a title dispute over land ownership, the Lincolns started yet again, this time moving across the Ohio River to a crude, dirt-floored home in Indiana. The family lived a life of long days of work, brutally cold winter nights, and next to no comforts.